I used to measure love by sounds, the soft domestic orchestra that told me our life was humming along. The kettle's thin whistle, the click of cabinet doors, the patter of socked feet sliding across vinyl, Ethan's spoon clinking against a cereal bowl he insisted was a drum. When the house sounded like that, I believed everything else would find its way. That morning, the kettle hissed but didn't sing. She turned the flame just low enough to keep it from whistling, like she was allergic to announcements. The quiet felt intentional, a careful arranging of volume, so nothing would be forced to the surface. She stood by the counter scrolling her phone, wrists crossed, shoulders tucked in. The screen cast a cool light across her face and flattened the warmth I used to know there. I poured coffee, waited a beat for her to look up, then another. "You want cinnamon today?" I asked, lifting the jar like it was a peace treaty. "Plain is fine," she said without lifting her eyes, as if cinnamon were a commitment. Ethan hopped into the kitchen wearing the blue cape he'd made in art class, a rectangle of felt with two wild lightning bolts stitched on by a teacher with either a big heart or poor eyesight. "Super Ethan can eat super fast," he announced, then proceeded to prove the opposite. The cape trailed on the floor. I try not to imagine it collecting the grit of the week, breadcrumbs, cat hair, the invisible residue of our silence. I cut his PB&J into the squares he liked and wrapped apple slices in a rubber band to keep them from browning, a trick my dad taught me. The small skills you inherit become anchors when everything else loosens. "Field trip today," I said, sliding the permission slip across the table with a pen. "Ms. Lopez says you need to bring a hat." Ethan saluted. "My dinosaur hat." He dug in his backpack and produced the ugliest green cap ever sewn. I loved it like it was family. My wife still fit in my mouth in the mornings, tucked her phone in her scrub pocket, and finally met my eyes. They were a clear brown that used to remind me of creek water. Now they looked like glass. "I've got training after work," she said. "Don't wait up." On a Tuesday, I try to keep it light. "They making you astronauts at the dental office." A pause, a half smile that didn't touch her eyes. "It's on the email," she said, which was her way of closing a door without slamming it. She picked up her travel mug, kissed the air near Ethan's cheek, and did not touch me on the way out. The door closed with a softness that somehow felt loud. At the warehouse, order soothed me. Forklifts beeped, pallets stacked, barcodes scanned. Men shouted measurements and jokes and weekend stories. I like work because it's honest about what it is. You move this here, you count that, you sign your name when it's done. You know when something fits. My supervisor, a guy who calls everyone buddy when he's tired, clapped my shoulder and said, "Steady Eddie," even though my name is Mark. I didn't correct him. It felt like a compliment today, to be mistaken for steady. During lunch, I sat on the loading dock with my thermos and tried to parse what had changed and when. She used to hum while doing dishes, small, tuneless threads that wove through our evenings. Lately, she washed plates like a surgeon prepping, efficient, silent, precise. The phone stayed face down at dinner. She laughed less. I told myself it was the commute or the office drama she never quite explained. I told myself we were adults with a child and jobs and taxes. We didn't need fireworks, just persistence. Back home, the afternoon lights slanted across the floorboards and made everything look a little kinder. Ethan scattered plastic dinosaurs so the herbivores could find sunshine, his words. I cooked spaghetti, the one meal that pulls praise from 6-year-olds without bribery. She came in late, dropped her bag, and went straight to the sink like it had been calling her all day. I set a plate out. She said she'd already eaten at training. The word training did a weird echo in the kitchen tile. After bedtime, after Ethan's questions about whether T-Rexes knew how to love their babies, "Yes," I said, because who was I to rewrite science at 9 p.m.? I found her rinsing a pan that was already clean. Steam fogged the window over the sink, turning our reflection into ghosts. I stood beside her, hip against the counter, and tried to find a road back to us. "Remember our Asheville trip?" I asked. "The cabin with the porch swing? We should take Ethan this fall. He'd lose his mind at the river." She kept scrubbing. The pan squeaked. She set it down, turned, folded the towel with edges so neat they looked measured. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm, almost gentle, like a nurse who has rehearsed this line for a patient she wants not to scare. "I never loved you," she said. Tom didn't stop. It just shifted sideways. The fridge hummed. A neighbor's car door thunked outside. The kettle, still on the stove from morning, clicked as it cooled. I waited for her to laugh, to say she'd meant she was mad, or tired, or thinking a different word. You mean right now? I heard myself ask. Like today. She shook her head, eyes steady. Ever. I watched her mouth form the word and tried to reconcile it with the 10 Christmases, the 2 apartments, the back porch we built the summer Ethan was born, the couch we almost broke hauling up the stairs because we were too proud to ask for help. We've been married 10 years, I said, not as an argument, but as a fact that might wake her from a spell. I know. Her expression softened briefly, like she wished she could return a purchase without hurting the cashier's feelings. We were good on paper. It just never clicked. There are a dozen things a man might say in movies. I didn't say any of them. I nodded, the way you do when a doctor gives you a test result in a voice that says he's said this before. Okay, I said. Thanks for telling me. It came out polite, absurdly polite, because I didn't know how to hold anything sharper without cutting myself. She brushed past me. A floral perfume I didn't recognize lifted off her skin and hung in the air a second too long. The front door closed with that same deliberate softness. I stood alone in our kitchen and listened to the last hiss of the kettle fade, and understood for the first time that quiet can be louder than shouting. Morning is a liar. It irons out the creases of the night and lays your life back on the bed like a shirt you can just slip into again. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Ethan narrating a battle between 2 toothbrushes, one blue, one red, complete with explosion noises he learned from cartoons I swore he didn't watch. The sentence from last night, "I never loved you," hovered at the edge of the room like steam you could walk through if you didn't look directly at it. She moved around the kitchen with a fluency that made me doubt my own ears. "Do you have quarters?" she asked, like marriages could run on laundry. The machine at work ate mine. "In the change cup in the car," I said, and waited. I thought maybe she'd clear her throat and say, about what I said. I gave her a ramp. "Rough night," I offered, almost cheerful, like a weatherman calling a hurricane breezy. She popped the lid on her travel mug. I slept fine. The snap of plastic felt like a door shutting in miniature. I decided to rename what happened. Not a confession, just late-night cruelty, the kind that grows out of exhaustion and frayed nerves and the fact that the dishwasher never seems to get loaded the way she prefers. People say things when they're hurt. They strike out. They don't mean the precise words. They mean something vague and spiky. "I'm drowning. Throw me a rope." I told myself she wanted a rope. I could be a rope, so I was extra kind. I packed Ethan's lunch so neatly a TSA agent would have applauded. I dropped a sticky note into the bag. "You were brave. Love, Dad." I texted her a picture of Ethan's paper crown from art class. Its glue globs like pearls. King of glue strikes again. She heart reacted. One red bubble on a screen. It hit like CPR, brief, mechanical life. Then came the receipts. Literally. I took out the bathroom trash, and 2 crumpled wads fell free. Lingerie receipts from a boutique across town that lives in soft lighting and whispers. Items I didn't recognize. Sizes I knew, but cuts I didn't. I stood over the bin and felt stupid for even reading them, like a teenager rummaging through a parent's dresser. I smoothed them flat against my thigh and told myself, married people buy private things. Maybe these were for me. Maybe there was a plan, but the plan never arrived. Instead, she started locking her phone. Not just a passcode, Face ID disabled. The screen flipped face down at every surface like it needed modesty. At dinner, I'd ask about her day, and she'd produce one of those non-answers that sound like an answer until you replay them in your head. Busy, but normal. She'd take a long drink of water, and I'd watch the knot in her throat move like a metronome. I'd remember the nights when she used to overshare office drama, who brought donuts, who cried in the supply closet, and feel lonely for information I once called boring. I bought a black spiral notebook at the drugstore. Nothing dramatic, just college-ruled paper and a plastic cover that made a papery squeak when you flexed it. I told myself it was to keep my head straight, the way you balance a checkbook to make sure your math matches the bank's. Date, time, detail. I wrote like a clerk, not a husband. Tuesday, 10:24 p.m. Arrived home, said staff training. Clothes smell floral, not her normal. Friday, 7:10 a.m. Phone face down. Laughed at text. Said it was mean from coworker. The notebook steadied me. Words on paper feel less like panic and more like a plan. Work kept its promise to be simple. At the warehouse, a pallet of ceramic sinks arrived in boxes, so pristine, I almost hated to cut them open. I like slicing tape clean right down the seam, no ragged edges. The guys were loud in the way men are when they don't want to talk about anything real. I joined them. I told a joke about the forklift that only made sense if you'd driven one. People laughed. The sound surprised me. It wasn't joy. It was relief, a bubble rising from deep underwater. During lunch, I sat on the loading dock and called an old friend I hadn't spoken to in a year because marriage does that to friendships. You assume time will make room for you when you need it. "You okay?" he asked halfway through my story, which I had framed as a weird patch. I said I was. She said something she didn't mean. I added, "She's stressed." He hummed in that male way that means I don't know how to fix this, but I don't want to hang up either. We switched to football. At home, I try to bait nostalgia. "Remember when we painted the nursery, and you fell off the step stool because you were dancing Prince?" I asked while rinsing plates. She smiled just enough to be polite. "I don't remember the falling part." "That was the best part," I said. "You cussed like a sailor, and then cried because you thought the baby could hear you swear." She laughed, a short exhale. I was dramatic. Still are, I wanted to say, but I didn't risk even that small intimacy. The air between us felt like a museum sign. "Do not touch." I suggested counseling one night, casual, like recommending a movie. Just a tune-up. "We've never done it." "We're fine," she said, already halfway into her phone. "Don't make everything a project." The word project lodged under my rib. I went to the guest bathroom and stared at my face. I tried on different expressions, stern, forgiving, amused, like hats in a store that didn't suit me anymore. I practiced lines. "I'm hurt. I need you to be honest with me. I'm scared." The mirror gave me my mouth, moving correctly. The house gave me no answer back. When I returned to the kitchen, the perfume hit me again. Floral, expensive, the kind of scent that comes with a small myth about how it was sourced from cliffs in Sicily or fog in Paris. She didn't wear perfume for me. I wrote that down in the notebook and immediately scratched a line through it. I didn't want to be that man, but I already was, at least on paper. That night in bed, the space between our bodies felt GPS measurable. I reached a hand across it and let it hover, not touching. She shifted, a tiny movement, like a bird resettling its feathers. "Do you ever feel stuck?" I asked the ceiling, gentle, like we're on a treadmill. "We're fine," she repeated, and turned her back to me so decisively the mattress recalibrated. I lay awake rehearsing a Kinderworld. In that version, the sentence from last night belonged to a movie we watched with a volume too loud. In that version, people are allowed to misspeak and be forgiven before breakfast. In that version, a notebook is just a list of chores, not a ledger of small deaths. I stacked the versions beside the bed and chose the softest one to sleep on. "We're going to be okay, because we always have been." I turned off the light and let the lie tuck me in. Sunday afternoons used to be our truce. Pancakes at noon, a cartoon that pretended to teach letters but mostly taught patience, and then the three of us drifting into our separate corners. Me with laundry, Ethan with toy cars, her with an "I need a nap" that I never argued with because rest felt like a moral right. I told myself families weren't built by grand gestures. They were held together by the dull grace of routine. I folded towels like I was paying a tithe. She stretched out on the sofa in her scrubs, shoes off, one arm flung over her eyes. The phone rested face up on the cushion by her hip. That alone was rare. Lately it lay face down everywhere, like it was too modest for our kitchen. Ethan turned the living room rug into a raceway, lining up Hot Wheels by color until the floor looked like a candy aisle. The house was quiet in a kind way. I could hear the dryer thump, the neighborhood dog barking 2 streets over, Ethan's engine noises. Her breathing lengthened, that soft, open-mouthed snore she'd deny if I ever mentioned it. The phone lit and dimmed with notifications I pretended not to see. I kept folding shirts into squares that calmed me, each cuff tucked, each collar flat. I was halfway through convincing myself that last week's sentence, "I never loved you," belonged to a phase we'd soon laugh about in counseling when the screen buzzed and bloomed with words I didn't invite. Last night was worth it. Same hotel. The message sat in the banner like a bird at a window, pecking, asking to be let in. The sender was labeled Dylan. Ortho representative of my brain did a ridiculous thing. It looked for another meaning. Orthodontic representative. Work contact. A man who lugged boxes of toothbrushes and free floss. Maybe hotel was a vendor nickname. Maybe worth it was about commissions. Maybe I could stand here and fold shirts until the meaning softened into something I could live with. The phone buzzed again. Check-in was easy. Parking back. Then a heart emoji. Then miss you in lowercase, like intimacy whispered through a keyhole. A sound left me that wasn't a word. It made Ethan look up. Pit stop, he asked, because in his world, everything is a race with bathroom breaks. Pit stop, I said, and managed a smile. 2 minutes. I sat on the ottoman and picked up her phone the way you pick up a sleeping animal. Careful, apologetic. Face ID was off. That small mercy felt like a trapdoor. My thumb hovered. This was the line, the one men on message boards and in locker rooms talk about like a cliff. On the far side was knowledge you couldn't unknow. On this side was a room where things might still be all right if you didn't turn on the light. I looked at my son, who was using 2 cars to blockade a third. You can't pass because red light, he told the blue car, sternly. I unlocked the phone. The message thread opened into a river. Weeks of texts, midday and late night. The tone was unhurried, practiced, like the kind of conversation people have when they are sure they'll be listened to. Photos, a hotel headboard, generic and beige. A close-up of her wrist wearing the gold bracelet I gave her last Christmas. The one with the tiny hinge that always pinched her skin. An art print of a foggy forest I recognized from the hallway of the mid-range hotel off Route 9. It was the kind of place traveling sales reps used because it had free breakfast and a lobby plant that looked watered by algorithms. He wrote like a man who'd done this before. Love that dress, cropped to fabric and collarbone. You smell like summer. Same room Wednesday. She replied with care. No names, no faces, just enough detail to make the pictures complete in your head. Can't stay long. Lunch training. Missed you all weekend. There were hearts, yes, and the occasional sentence that wanted to be poetry, but came out like advertising copy. Still, the rhythm told the truth. It told it so quietly they must have believed it didn't count as noise. Something mechanical woke up in me. I forwarded screenshots to my email, subject line docs, because I couldn't bring myself to write the word. Thumb steady, breath shallow. I sent what the law would call evidence and what my heart called splinters. I scrolled back to see when it started. 8 months. Right before Ethan's birthday, when we'd argued on the porch about whether to invite his entire class or just the kids he actually named his friends. We'd settled on everyone because that felt generous, because generosity had always been our shortcut to feeling like good people. I searched the camera roll and found a hidden album. I'd never used one. Apparently she did. More of the same, ironically careful. The corner of a mirror, the curve of a shoulder blade, the shadow of a man's hand that could be anyone's and therefore felt like everyone's. A receipt from a midweek lunch, 2 entrees, 1 dessert, a glass of white wine. I knew her rule about wine on work days. I knew every rule. The new one she'd made lived in this album. Ethan drove a car up my shin and made a siren noise. You're a bridge, he said, and rolled the car across my knee. I put a hand over his without looking away from the screen. Gentle, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded like a recording of me, played through a cheap speaker. I checked our joint credit card app and matched dates. Hotel charges at 1:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. Parking fees in the afternoon. Coffee receipts 2 towns over. My black notebook sat on the coffee table. I added a line. Sunday, 2:13 p.m. Text from Dylan, ortho rep. Last night was worth it. Same hotel. Hidden album found. Photos. Bracelet. Route 9 art print. Forwarded to email. The ink looked very black. Denial tried one last tactic. It whispered, what if she's leaving? What if this is her exit? Not her betrayal. As if one could soften the other. As if there was a version where I could bless it because it came with neat edges. My body knew better. It felt like I'd swallowed a stone. She stirred and shifted on the sofa. I dropped the phone exactly where it had been and stood up so fast the room wobbled. Snack? I asked Ethan, too brightly. Pit stop needs fuel. He grinned and followed me to the kitchen. I cut an apple and realized my hands had learned to shake without spilling. The knife flashed and thudded, steady as a metronome. I wrapped the slices with a rubber band. The silly trick suddenly felt like a ritual to keep something from turning brown too fast. From the doorway, I looked back at her. The arm over her eyes, the open mouth, the steady breath. The woman I married. The woman who texted someone about the back parking lot. Both truths stood side by side and refused to merge. I put the apple bowl on the coffee table and knelt beside Ethan's cars. I lined a blue one next to his and said, softly, "Your turn." He pushed his car and it clicked against mine. "Crash," he shouted, delighted. "Crash," I echoed, tasting the word, learning its weight. I waited until the house softened into night. Waiting gave me the illusion of control, like I could choose the weather if I picked the right hour. Ethan fell asleep in a tangle of dinosaur limbs and blanket fringe. Blue car parked on the pillow beside his ear like a security guard. I stood there longer than necessary, memorizing the rise and fall of his back. He breathes and counts to 5. He sighs on the 6th. A father keeps these numbers the way sailors keep maps. She was in our bedroom, cross-legged, lotioning her hands like always, knuckles to palm, palm to knuckles, the small domestic ballet of a person sure of their skin. The bracelet I'd seen in the photo caught the lamp and flared, a tiny flashbulb. Her phone rested on the nightstand, face down, as if ashamed. I took the chair by the window. I didn't want to tower or plead. I wanted to be the voice I would trust if I were her. "Who is Dylan?" I asked, almost conversational, as if the name had come up at work and I was connecting dots. The first expression across her face was confusion, so quick it felt rehearsed, then amusement that didn't reach her eyes. "Sales rep," she said, capping the lotion. "Ortho supplies. He brings us toothbrushes and bad jokes. And hotel keys." I kept my voice low. The room absorbed it. "Back parking lots." The glimmer in her eyes hardened into flint. "You went through my phone," she said. Not a question, a verdict. "Mark, that's—" "I saw a banner," I said. "I didn't go looking. It arrived." "And you dove," she said, lifting the phone like it was exhibit. "You don't trust me." "That's controlling." The word controlling landed on the bed between us like a dead bird. I wanted to say I trust stop signs and gravity and field trip forms return on time. I wanted to say I trusted her enough to build a life where my toothbrush stood beside hers in a cup we bought on sale. But I had screenshots in my email with timestamps that cut cleaner than any argument. I slid my black notebook across the quilt. "I started this when the math stopped adding up," I said. "Dates. Times. Not feelings, facts." I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince, the judge in my head or the boy sleeping down the hall. Wednesday hotel charges at 1:42 p.m., parking receipts. The forest print in the hall outside room, 214. "Your bracelet." "You're insane," she said softly, like kindness dressed as insult. "This is paranoid." 8 months, I said. "Right before Ethan's birthday. You were late to the party because the cupcakes got stuck in traffic." She made a face like she'd bitten an apple and found a bruise. "We were dead years ago, Mark." Her voice steadied. Different timbre now, the one she uses when she needs a patient to open wider. "What do you call it when two people share a roof, and that's it? This isn't a marriage. We're roommates with a mortgage. If we were dead," I said, "you should have buried us. Not shop for flowers at the cemetery." She laughed once, a sharp exhale. "You always do this. Make metaphors so you don't have to feel the thing." "I feel it," I said, and surprised myself with how calm I sounded. My hands were steady. My throat wasn't. "I feel enough to make sure Ethan doesn't drown in it." I pointed toward the hall. "I'm not here to scream. I'm here to set a line." Her jaw worked. The lotion had made her hands shiny. She wiped her palms on the quilt, leaving 2 damp prints like signatures. "You had to snoop," she said again, leaning on the word like a crutch. "You had to control. You're suffocating." I almost apologized out of habit. Years of keeping the peace had trained my mouth to rush in with repair. I stopped it. "I'm not going to apologize for looking at the fire when the room smells like smoke." Silence opened its ribcage. The hum of the bedside lamp grew loud enough to be a sound. She glanced at the phone, and the glance told the truth the way a flinch does. "It's not serious," she said, softening, reaching for a smaller sin. "It's a distraction. Emotional support. Hotels have pillows," I said. "It's serious enough to need a back in trance." She folded her legs under and sat taller, switching strategies. "We could try counseling," she offered, like a coupon at the register when the total surprised her. "If you want." I didn't mean what I said that night about not loving you. You meant it," I said. I didn't make it cruel. I sat on the bed like a folded sweater. And even if you didn't, the texts do. We can't vote our way out of this. She stood and paced to the dresser, then back, then stopped at the door as if she might leave the conversation the way she leave the room, softly, without closing anything behind her. "You'll ruin us," she said, "if you make a scene." I pictured Dylan's wife, who didn't know yet that her living room contained a crater. I pictured Ethan learning words like custody and schedule and saying them with the precise curiosity kids give to new shapes. I picture myself years from now, standing in a kitchen with a man I'd become who would either be proud of me or disappointed that I chose smallness. "I'm not making a scene," I said. "I'm making a plan." "For what?" She almost laughed. "Divorce? You can't even say the word." "For boundaries," I said. "For Ethan. For money. For sleeping arrangements." I gestured to the far side of the house. "I'll take the guest room starting tonight. We talk about our son and writing from now on. We don't introduce him to anyone we're dating without a conversation first. We keep the house peaceful until we figure out the legal part." Her mouth opened, closed. "You're doing this to punish me." "I'm doing this so he doesn't pay," I said. My voice cracked on he, and I didn't hide it. "I can handle hurt. He shouldn't have to measure it." She lifted the phone, thumb hovering like a diver on a board. "If you blow this up, I swear." "I'm not blowing it up," I said. "It's already on fire. I'm calling the trucks." She stared a long time, and I could see the calculation flicker. A fair math, risk assessments, the familiar ledger where adults place their wants on one side and the cost on the other. I used to do that math with her for vacations and refrigerators. We were good at it. We were careful. When she spoke again, her voice was very small, the size of the room when you're the last one left in it. "You'll take him from me. I'll protect him," I said. "From chaos. From lies. From two parents tearing each other to strips." I stood, knees stiff, and felt older than my age. "We can do this with dignity, or we can let the worst parts of us drive. I'm choosing dignity." She laughed without humor. "You're so noble when you're scared." "Maybe," I said, "but nobility feeds a kid better than denial." We didn't finish the fight. Fights like this don't end. They recess. She brushed past me, the floral perfume ghosting the air, and went down the hall. I sat on the edge of the bed and put both hands on the quilt where her palms had printed, as if pressing my own hands there might cool the heat. In the doorway to Ethan's room, I listened again. 5 counts in, Scion 6. I breathed with him until my own lungs remembered how. I told the dark, not for the first time, a sentence I wanted to live by. "I won't let the grown-up mess spill on the boys' floor." Then I went to the guest room, gathered a pillow and a blanket, and chose my side of the line. Revenge wanted to sprint. It laced its shoes and stretched in my chest, promising speed and spectacle. Confrontations in parking lots, a public shaming that would leave scorch marks on memory. I pictured it and felt a brief sugar rush. Me heroic, her exposed, a crowd murmuring its approval. Then I looked down the hall at Ethan's door, at the glow-in-the-dark stars he insisted on sticking in a crooked galaxy, and I put revenge on the bench. I needed proof, not fireworks. I needed a plan that would hold in fluorescent light, in a courtroom, in the quiet judgments of future me. So I started with paper. At the kitchen table, after bedtime, I stacked our bank statements in neat piles like shingles. Highlighter uncapped. I made a path. Hotel charges at 1:42 p.m., 12:18 p.m., 3:03 p.m. on weekdays labeled training. Parking lot fees in the afternoon, a coffee place 2 towns over, a lunch receipt with a split dessert on a Wednesday when she told me she'd skipped because of a late patient. I wrote dates beside each line in my black notebook, a ledger of ordinary betrayals. I moved to email. I searched our shared inbox for reservation, confirmation, meeting, off-site. She was careful. Nothing obvious. But a calendar invite popped up for a recurring vendor in service that fell exactly on the days I'd highlighted. The subject lines were careful, but the pattern was not. In the garage, I sat in the car where the air felt neutral, where the smell of old coffee and winter wet from boots could belong to any day in our marriage. I called a family law attorney a coworker had whispered about months back when his cousin went through a mess. The number rang 3 times. A receptionist with a voice like a bomb asked for my name and offered a free 15-minute consult. The lawyer came on with the brightness of someone who has learned to be both brisk and kind. What's going on, Mark? I told her the outline, the parts one could say without my voice shaking. I left out the perfume and the lotion and the way the word ever from I never loved you kept echoing in my ribs. I talked in nouns and dates. When I finished, she exhaled in a way I recognized. I believe you, and also this isn't the first time I've heard it. Here's what I want you to do, she said. Keep documenting. Screenshots, financials, your caregiving, everything. Do not confront her employer. Do not threaten anyone. No scenes. No ultimatums. This is chess. Think 2 moves ahead. What about our son? I asked. Saying son steadied me. It's the one word that still fits my mouth. Start a parenting log, she said. Bedtime, school drop-offs and pickups, meals, homework, doctor visits, who does what. Judges like patterns. Do not use your child as a messenger. Keep the home calm. And separate finances you control. Open an account in your name only. Direct deposit if you can. Transparency matters. Don't hide, but do protect yourself. Do I have to leave the house? I asked, picturing a suitcase and Ethan's face pinching with questions. Not unless there's danger, she said. Stability is a value for courts and for kids. If you can manage civility, stay put for now. We'll file for legal separation with a temporary parenting plan when you're ready. Will the affair matter? The word sounded sitcom-ish on my tongue, too small for the whole it described. In some jurisdictions, it can affect spousal support if marital assets were used, she said. But don't hinge your sanity on punishment. Hinge it on structure. After we hung up, I stayed in the dark car and practiced breathing in 4s like my therapist from years ago had taught me when my dad died. In, hold, out, hold. Grief and strategy make strange bedfellows, but there they were, sharing my driver's seat. At work the next day, I told no one. The warehouse is a place where emotions get flattened by pallets unless you talk about them directly, and I didn't trust myself not to leak rage disguised as jokes. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a message from Luis, a forklift guy who sees everything because he doesn't look like he's watching. Hey, not my business, but I saw your wife at Cafe Harper last Thursday with a tall dude in a suit. Thought it was a sales call till I saw hands. You okay? He didn't send a photo. The mercy made my throat sting. Thanks for telling me, I wrote. Working it out. Please keep this between us. 3 dots. Then, always, brother. At home, I moved like a tenant, polite, quiet. I cooked dinner, folded laundry, read books to Ethan in voices that belonged to cheerful animals because that's what he needed. I kept my tone neutral with her, limited to logistics, schedules, groceries, bills. When she came in late and said, traffic, I said, okay, and I wrote the time down later. Every sentence I did not speak became a brick in a wall I hoped would keep the storm out of our kids' room. I opened a new notebook just for Ethan. Parenting log on the cover in block letters. Monday, drop off 7:45 a.m. lunch packed, PB&J, apple, carrot sticks. Pick up 3:10 p.m. homework, spelling, finish together. Bedtime 8 p.m. Read Where the Wild Things Are 2 times. He asked if monsters can be good. Answered yes. The act of writing, it felt like stacking sandbags against a river that hadn't crested yet. Finances next. I opened a checking account in my name at the credit union I've used since I was 20, where the teller still calls me Han. I moved my direct deposit there, left enough in the joint to cover bills we'd both see, and printed statements for my new file. Transparency, not secrecy. I emailed her a tidy spreadsheet of monthly expenses with my contributions highlighted. I will not be the one who hides. That night, the guest room became mine properly. I brought in my pillow, then my book, then the framed photo of me and Ethan at the county fair with mustard on our shirts and sun in our eyes. The move wasn't a declaration. It was a boundary line marked in painter's tape, bright, temporary, clear. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, the bracelet winking like it knew more than both of us. We don't have to be dramatic, she said. We could just be adults. We're being adults, I said. We're setting terms so the kid doesn't write this story with his stomach. She rolled her eyes. You and your metaphors. Me and my son, I corrected. After she went to bed, I sat at the desk and sent one more email to Dylan's wife. I kept it clinical. Dates, times, 3 screenshots, a single sentence at the end. You deserve to know. I read it 3 times to make sure there was no venom in it, only fact. My finger hovered over send, and I thought about the blast radius. I thought about how truth travels. Messy, late, insistent. I pressed the button. Then I closed both notebooks, turned off the lamp, and sat in the dark room until the house exhaled. I wasn't proud. I wasn't vengeful. I was something narrower and harder. Ready. Lines don't draw themselves. They blur. They drift. They pretend to be carpets you can keep sweeping under. The morning after I emailed Dylan's wife, I woke in the guest room with a stale taste of resolve and knew I had to pick up a pen, not for my notebook this time, but to sketch the borders of a life that wouldn't leak. I made pancakes shaped like comets because Ethan had a space unit at school. He ate the tails first and saved the round centers for the astronauts. She came into the kitchen already dressed, perfume like a flag. We exchanged the kind of greetings strangers use in elevators. "I'll handle drop-off," I said, sliding Ethan's backpack to my side of the counter. She lifted a shoulder. "Fine. Also," I added, voice steady, "we need rules." She laughed a small, brittle sound. "Are we teenagers?" "We're parents," I said, and that word steadied the table. Parents need rules. After drop-off, I came home to a house that felt like a stage between scenes, props in place, lights cooling, crew waiting for someone to call action. I set my laptop on the dining table and wrote a document titled Household Boundaries. Not a manifesto, just a list. Communication about Ethan in writing, text/email. Shared calendar for school/medical. No overnights with outside partners while we're both living here. No introductions of partners to Ethan without prior discussion, and a 90-day rule. Finances transparent. Each contributes agreed amounts to joint bills. Guest room remains mine. I read it 3 times, deleted anything that sounded like punishment, left only what sounded like structure. At noon, I emailed it to her and printed a copy for the fridge, not as a threat, but as a lighthouse, steady, visible, impossible to pretend you didn't see. 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her, "This is dramatic." Me, "It's clear." Her, "You don't get to control me." Me, "I'm not controlling you. I'm protecting our son's stability and our own sanity." Her, "You're impossible." Me, "I'm consistent." The lawyer's voice echoed. Chess, not checkers. I opened a shared calendar, color-coded it. Blue for Ethan, green for me, yellow for her. I added his soccer practice, library days, the dentist appointment I booked for next month, parent-teacher night. I invited her to each entry. She accepted half, declined the rest without comment. That afternoon, I called Ms. Lopez, Ethan's teacher. I didn't tell her the whole story because schools are not confessionals, but I asked for a quick meeting after class. We sat at the tiny rectangle table that makes every adult look vaguely apologetic, and I said, "We're going through some changes at home. I want you to know I'm committed to keeping his routine steady." She nodded with the compassion of a person who has seen a lot of living. "He's a resilient kid," she said. "He loves to help pass out crayons. Give him jobs at home." I wrote it down. Give Ethan jobs. Dignity and small responsibilities. Evenings became quieter, which is not the same as peaceful, but as a cousin. I cooked simple chicken, rice, vegetables that could be identified by sight. I played music low. I let Ethan stir sauce and set forks and announce, "All astronauts to the table," in his best mission control voice. She ate with us sometimes and sometimes not. When she did, conversation stayed in the safe lanes. Spelling tests, soccer cleats, the art project involving glitter that would haunt our surfaces until summer. One night, I placed a counseling brochure by her placemat. I'd picked it up from a community center where the paper rack asked politely to help yourself. Couples, individuals, sliding scale, daylight hours. "If you want to try," I said, neutral. She didn't look at it. "I already told you," she said. "I'm not pretending." "I'm not asking for pretend," I said. "I'm asking for us to have a witness while we talk. It helps some people not say the worst version of themselves." "You want someone to tell me I'm wrong," she said. "I want someone to keep us from burning the furniture while we argue about fire," I said. But I slid the brochure away and didn't mention it again. Consent matters, even in repair. Her phone kept lighting up. I stopped looking. Not ignorance, discipline. My proof was already gathered. Any new pain would only be repeats. Instead, I poured my attention into the logs. What Ethan ate, how long we read, what time the light went out, how he'd started lining his sneakers by the door like a soldier because he liked being ready. I gave him jobs: napkin captain, plant waterer, dish rinser. He strutted with the solemnity 6-year-olds bring to tasks that feel like belonging. On Thursday, she came home at 10, eyes bright with the kind of energy you don't get from overtime. I was at the table labeling folders: medical, school, legal, because order is a raft. "You're turning our life into a filing cabinet," she said, tossing her keys into a bowl hard enough to make the metal complain. "I'm turning chaos into categories," I said. "It offends chaos." She leaned on the counter and watched me. "Do you hate me?" she asked, not plaintive, more curious, like she was checking the weather before choosing a coat. I considered the question. Hate is hot and fast. I didn't have a luxury. "No," I said. "I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I'm not going to make those your problem. I'm going to make them mine with my therapist and my notebooks and too much tea." "You're so measured," she said, disdain in the shape of a compliment. "I'm practicing," I said. "It's new." On Friday, the email came from Dylan's wife. It was brief and blisteringly polite. "Thank you for telling me." I confronted him. "I'll be speaking to a lawyer. I wish you strength." She attached screenshots that overlapped mine and made the timeline a rope he could climb. I forwarded them to my attorney and then closed the laptop like the act could lower the temperature of the room. That night, when I tucked Ethan in, he asked, "Are you and Mommy mad?" He said it the way kids ask if the thunder is angry. "We're big feeling." I said carefully, "It's okay to be big feeling. It's not okay to be mean. We're practicing being kind, even when we're big feeling." He nodded, considering. "Can I have 2 blue cars in bed?" "Reckless," I said, "but permitted." In the guest room, I laid my phone face up on the nightstand. Small rebellion. I read a chapter of a paperback where nothing much happens except a man learns to name things correctly. I slept badly but honestly. The next morning, I posted the household boundaries on the fridge with 2 magnets shaped like oranges. She saw it, exhaled through her nose, and didn't take it down. That counted as a yes in our new dialect. I brewed coffee. The kettle sang, really sang this time, high and sure. I turned off the flame and let the sound trail into quiet. A line had been drawn. It wasn't a wall. It was a shore, and on one side of it stood the 3 of us, wet to the knees, blinking at the sky. The tide would come again. It always does. But I had sandbags. I had a map. And the boy down the hall had 2 blue cars and a father who meant what he said. There's a difference between striking a match and wiring a house. Matches are bright and satisfying. Wiring keeps the lights on. I wanted flames. I chose wiring. I started with the smallest public truth, a LinkedIn profile. Dylan turned out to be as generic as his hotel chain. Medical sales, orthodontic supplies, regional territory. His headshot wore the practiced smile of a man who's learned to sell assurances by the quarter. Scrolling revealed a wedding ring in one conference photo and a proud Dad X2 blip in his bio. Beneath his connections, the algorithm suggested his wife, Mara, a teacher, 2 kids in Halloween costumes flanking her in the banner image. Their family photo whispered the kind of safety that makes you ache. Matching flannel, pumpkin patch, hay bales, the whole American postcard. I drafted an email to her the way you thread a needle. Slow, steady, eyes stinging. "My name is Mark. I'm married to her name. I believe she and your husband are involved. I'm attaching 3 screenshots with dates and times. I'm not writing to hurt you. I'm writing because you deserve the truth. If you'd rather not hear from me again, I will respect that." I reread it for venom and scraped every bit off. I attached the cleanest proofs. No flesh, only facts. The bracelet photo, the hotel art print, the back parking instructions. I hovered over send and thought of blast radiuses and rainfall, and how both spread beyond intent. I clicked. Her reply arrived in under an hour. The subject line was a single word: "Thank you." The body was short and blisteringly clear. I had suspicions. "Your screenshots confirm it. I'm attaching my own. I will be contacting an attorney. Take care of your son." Beneath her closing were images of Dylan's texts, times that overlapped mine, hotel confirmations forwarded to a work folder, a selfie of my wife's hand with his ring visible, the kind of photo that could be anyone's and therefore felt like an indictment of everyone. I felt a bolt of nauseous solidarity. For her, for me, for the dumb predictability of it all. I forwarded the full set to my lawyer with the subject materials. She called 10 minutes later. "You've kept this clean," she said. "That helps. Here's our next move. We file for legal separation with a proposed temporary parenting plan. We'll request a mutual non-disparagement clause and a guideline parenting schedule. You got the caregiving law good. Keep it going. And remember, no public shaming, no employer contact. Courts like adults. Do we mention the affair?" I asked. My mouth still hated the word, but it was shorter than the thing that broke the house. "In the financial section," she said. "If marital funds supported it, we'll address that. But don't frame your sanity around punishment. Frame it around structure." That night, I set a timer on my phone, 20 minutes to write without stopping. Not the log, not the ledger, just the feelings I kept quarantined so they wouldn't leak into my parenting voice. Anger, humiliation, grief, the temptation to make a show of my pain. I wrote them like labels on boxes I did not intend to open in front of a child. When the timer chimed, I closed the notebook and cooked rice. At 8:17 p.m., after Ethan's bath and a dissertation on which dinosaur would make the best firefighter, he chose Triceratops for the horns, I texted her, "We need to talk briefly tonight. Logistics only." She responded with a thumbs up, the new language of yes. We met at the dining table, a neutral zone where bills get paid and birthday candles get counted. I had my household boundaries printed and a second sheet titled Proposed Temporary Parenting Plan. Bullet points. Alternating weeks. Wednesday dinner visit for the off-week parent. Exchange at school to avoid doorstep dramas. Shared Google Calendar. No overnight guests for either of us while Ethan is present. No introductions of partners for 90 days minimum with prior discussion. She read them. Expression flat. A professional reviewing an email that didn't belong to her department. "You already talked to a lawyer," she said. "Yes," I said. I didn't apologize. This keeps things clear. We both sign, we both honor it. Our son gets a stable map. "You think you're going to take him from me," she said. The sentence had a practiced edge, like something she'd said to a mirror. "I think we're going to share him like grown-ups," I said. "And I think stability matters more than pride. We can write our names on this map and follow it. Or we can keep improvising and call it freedom while we teach him chaos." She tapped the paper with a fingernail. "This no overnights rule. That's for you, not me." "It's for him," I said. "He doesn't need to hear a stranger's toothbrush in the morning." "Judgy," she said. "Specific," I said. Her phone buzzed face down on the table. We both pretended not to hear it. Finally, she exhaled, signed the boundaries, and slid the plan back. "I'll have my attorney look at the rest," she said. "But fine, we can try this schedule." "Thank you," I said, and meant it, not as praise, but as acknowledgement that even brutal cooperation was better than the other thing. Before bed, I sent my lawyer scans of the sign boundaries. She replied with a draft petition for legal separation attached, the subject line review. The language was cold and clean, irretrievable breakdown of marriage. The phrase made me think of trucks and ramps. We were a low that had shifted. Word got to Dylan, maybe from Mara, maybe from a vibration in the air that affairs can feel like animals before an earthquake. He texted her something long. Her face changed in the kitchen light. "Don't blow this up," she said to me later, palms open like she was warding off a spell. "You'll ruin everything." "Everything is already ruined," I said, not unkindly. "Now we build something livable from the pieces." The next day after school, Ethan and I sat at the table with a calendar and 2 markers. 2 houses, I told him, keeping my voice soft. This week with Daddy, next week with Mommy. Wednesdays we eat together, just us. He listened with the careful intensity he gives to Lego instructions. "Do I get a blue car at both houses?" he asked. "You get a blue car everywhere," I said, and drew a tiny square on each week that meant your car lives here too. He nodded, satisfied. Maps help small sailors too. Later, when the house was quiet, I walked from room to room, touching door frames like a pilgrim. Bedroom, bathroom, the scuff spot on the hallway where Ethan learned to ride a scooter indoors when it rained. I wasn't blessing the rooms. I was inventorying them. What would travel? What would stay? What would become a story we tell with a wince one day and with a shrug the next? The wiring was in. No sparks, no applause. Just fixtures that would, if I kept at it, Keep the light steady when we needed to see. Consequences don't arrive like police sirens. They seep under doors, ride in on lunches packed the night before, wait at red lights with you, and put their hand on your shoulder 30 seconds after you decide to be brave. The morning after we signed the boundaries, they started showing up with name tags. The first knock was Mara's, metaphorically. She emailed to say she'd confronted Dylan. Her message was precise enough to double as a court filing. I told him I have copies. He attempted to minimize, then lied, then confessed. He is leaving the house today. I've notified his HR that he is not to contact me at work. She did not ask me for anything. She didn't pour her feelings into my lap. The restraint made me want to weep, for her steadiness, for the fact that two polite strangers had to build a bridge midair to keep from falling. The second knock was the legal draft I knew was coming. My lawyer filed our petition for legal separation at 9:12 a.m. I watched the timestamp land in my inbox like a date carved on a tree we once climbed. Irretrievable breakdown. 2 words that sound like a conveyor belt deciding not to be a conveyor belt anymore. With the filing came a proposed, temporary parenting plan that mirrored the one I typed at our table. I signed. She signed. The toner smell clung to my fingers all day. News travels by paths you don't map. By afternoon, my mother called with the tone she saves for neighbors' funerals and big weather. "Is everything okay?" she asked, which in mom speak means I know something. Tell me the shape of it. I told her the shape, not the whole sculpture. She listened, hummed that grief hum that mothers use to keep their children from shattering. "Come for Sunday," she said. "Ethan can feed the ducks." I said we would. Ducks are good witnesses. They don't repeat what they hear. At work, I kept my head down. The warehouse has its own gossip economy, but I must have looked like a man who couldn't afford a rumor because the guys gave me silence as a gift. Luis handed me a coffee with a nod. "For the road," he said, meaning a day. We stacked and scanned and lifted, and for 8 hours I could pretend the only things that needed moving were heavy and dumb and asked nothing of my heart. That evening, I texted her, "We need to tell him together." She replied okay within a minute, which I appreciated like you appreciate a driver using a blinker on a rainy night. We rehearsed nothing. We sat on the couch with the good light off and the small lamp on, so the room felt like a tent. Ethan placed his blue car between us like a referee. I reminded myself, no adult words, no blame. Keep it short. Keep it soft. I started. "Buddy, we have something important to tell you." He looked up, all eyes. "Mom and Dad are going to live in different houses." The sentence landed, heavy but whole. "You didn't do anything wrong," I added. "We both love you. Today, tomorrow, and every day after that." He asked logistics first. A child's mercy. "Will I have 2 toothbrushes?" "Yes," I said. "1 at each house." "2 blue cars." "2, I promised, and then amended. "And the one in your pocket, which can go anywhere." He considered, then asked the question that made both of us swallow. "Are you mad at each other?" I took a breath. "We're big feeling," I said carefully. "But we are not going to be mean. We are going to be kind, because you deserve kind." He nodded, solemn as a judge, and then he wanted mac and cheese, because hunger is the body's way of saving you from thinking too long. I boiled pasta and stirred cheese while my hands shook quietly. She set plates out, and we fell into a cooperative rhythm that felt like a funeral reception. Everyone knows where the forks go. After bedtime, she hovered in the doorway. "You made it sound gentle," she said, as if that were an unexpected kindness. "It needs to be gentle for him," I said. "For us, it needs to be true." That week the fallout bloomed. Dylan's wife, sharp, efficient, served him with a notice to vacate and contacted his employer's ethics line. I know because she told me, not with glee, but with the crispness of a woman removing a splinter. "He can deal with consequences," she wrote. "My kids will not deal with chaos." The sentence felt like kinship. The internet wants blood. Grown-ups want quiet. My wife oscillated like a ceiling fan with a loose chain. Blame, then apology, then nostalgia. One night, "You ruined everything by telling her." The next, "Maybe we could try counseling." The night after, a long message that started with shared memories. I could smell the creek and the string lights and the summer air as she typed them, and ended with, "I was bored, Mark. I was bored with being good. I can't be the price you pay for excitement." I wrote back and left it at that. Not cruel, not sermon, Just a door labeled exit. We moved money like grown-ups. Joint account topped up for mortgage and utilities. New accounts annotated in a shared spreadsheet. Passwords updated without drama. Property lines were drawn with software instead of chalk. It's not romantic, but it keeps the lights on. The school counselor called to offer a check-in for Ethan. We do short games-based sessions, she said. It gives kids a place to put their questions. I said yes. She asked me what words we'd used at home. I told her. Good, she said. Consistency is a gift. I wrote that down. Gifts aren't always toys. On Wednesday, the off-week dinner visit, I took Ethan for pancakes at the all-day place where the cook calls everyone chief. He spilled syrup on my sleeve and then patted it with napkins until it was worse. You're trying, I told him, both about the syrup and about our new shape. He nodded and slid a blue car across the table. You can borrow this one if you miss me at night, he said, businesslike. I pocketed it like a relic. Back at home, she stood by the sink staring at nothing. I told Dylan it's over, she said without turning. It's complicated now. It was always complicated, I said. But thank you. She bristled. Don't act like you're the hero. I'm not a hero, I said. I'm a dad with a filing system. She almost smiled, then didn't. Do you ever wonder if we could have fixed it before all this? Yes, I said, because lying would be an unkindness now. But wondering isn't a plan. Nights settled into a pattern. Guest room, lamp, book where a man learns to sweep his own porch. A timer for 15 minutes of feelings poured into the cheap notebook. A text to my brother who replied with dumb memes, because sometimes laughter is the only sandbag that doesn't leak. Therapy appointment booked. Calendar blocks labeled do nothing, because rest had to be scheduled like a meeting or it would never happen. The consequences kept arriving, but so did small reliefs. A signed order from the court granting our temporary plan. An email from Ms. Lopez saying Ethan had been helpful and bright. A warm Saturday with ducks and crusts of bread, and my mom saying, "You're doing right by him," like a benediction. None of it felt like victory. It felt like a ship with patches, afloat because someone kept bailing. But afloat is not nothing. A float gets you to a shore you didn't know you were aiming for. Fallout isn't a single boom. It's a weather pattern. It drifts, settles, coats everything in a fine grit you keep wiping off only to find more. Boundaries are the umbrellas you open under that sky, not because they stop the storm, but because they give you a dry circle to stand in. The first week on the new schedule, the house learned our new choreography. My mornings were precise. Wake Ethan, dinosaur toothbrush, oatmeal with too much cinnamon because he calls it dragon dust, backpack check, blue car in the pocket, out the door. In the evenings, I became the metronome. Homework, dinner, bath, 2 books, lights out. Routine is a kind of love you can prove. With her, the air alternated between chilled and humid. Some nights she moved through the kitchen like a tenant late on rent, quiet, apologetic, avoiding eye contact. Other nights, she'd arrive hot with story. You know what Miss Patel did at work? She'd start. And for a second, we were almost old us. Gossip at the sink, inside jokes about dental drama, a shared smirk over a world too small to hurt us. Then one of us would remember the crater, and the conversation would drop its wings. The household boundaries page stayed on the fridge like a treaty. I learned to point at it instead of argue. The first time she came home at 11:40 p.m. on an off night, perfume thick enough to have a name, she started to narrate excuses out of muscle memory. I just tapped the bullet point. No overnights with outside partners while cohabiting. I didn't, she began. I shook my head. This isn't cross-exam, I said. It's a map. We either follow it or we change it together. She stared, then poured herself water like it might wash the taste of being called to the carpet. The next week, she was home by 10. Our phones became filing cabinets. We kept communication about Ethan and writing like the plan said. Her, can you switch Wednesday pickup? Staff meeting added. Me, yes, confirmed 3:10 p.m. We'll add to calendar. Her, thank you. Me, welcome. The politeness felt artificial at first, like actors reading lines. Then it softened into a language we could trust. Less room for trapdoors when sentences have dates and punctuation. Dylan's silhouette flickered at the edge of our lives like a bad streetlight. Not present, but not entirely gone. I catch the quick tilt of her head when her phone buzzed, and know it was him trying to reassert gravity. Sometimes she would take the call outside and come back with eyes that looked like she'd been staring at a far shore. Sometimes she'd set the phone face down and breathe like she was resisting a reflex. Once in the doorway, she said, "It's over. Not for me, but maybe for the room." "Good," I said, because that's the only word that belongs to sentences that simple. Anger didn't vanish. It learned manners. It sat with me in therapy on Wednesdays and waited its turn. "Where does your boundary end and your control begin?" My therapist asked, not like a riddle, but like a measurement we could actually take. I brought in the printed plan, and we read it like a text in school. "This part protects your son," she said, tapping the no overnights rule. "This part protects you from caretaking your ex's feelings." She pointed at communication and writing. "This part is where your resentment will try to sneak in and act like vigilance." We underlined that one. There were petty temptations. To correct her phrasing in a text. To say, "actually," and then deliver a monologue about facts. To forward her an article about the psychological impact of parentification when she asked Ethan to carry messages. Instead, I cut and pasted from a draft note titled "Neutral Phrases" on my phone. "Let's keep Ethan out of adult logistics. Please send scheduling requests by text. I'll confirm within 24 hours. I'm not available to discuss that tonight. I'm happy to revisit on Sunday." I sounded like customer service because parts of parenting are customer service. The customer is a 6-year-old with a blue car and a fragile idea of the world. On my off week, the silence had edges. I still made 2 plates out of habit and then scraped one back into the pan. I sat on the couch and caught myself listening for the weight of his feet thumping down the hall, for the dad that begins with drama and ends with a hug. I didn't fill the time with noise. I set appointments, paid bills, fixed the cabinet door that always squeaked. I learned to cook one dish well, lemon chicken with potatoes, and invited my brother over to be my proof that I could eat at a table without negotiating bites with a child. He showed up with beer and terrible jokes. "This is good," he said, mouth full. "Don't tell Mom I said that. She'll think you're healed." Work became a refuge that didn't pretend to be therapy, just a place where I could move weight from one shelf to another and call it accomplishment. Luis and I started eating lunch in the break room instead of our cars. He'd talk about his niece and how she insists on sleeping with her soccer ball, and we'd laugh at the kind of specificity that proves a person is loved by someone. On Fridays, I let myself stop at the river for 10 minutes and watch water insist on forward. It's not profound, it's just true. Then, the boundary test I knew would arrive did. She texted on a Sunday, "I want to introduce Ethan to a friend." My thumbs froze. We had a 90-day rule. It had been 52 days. I read the sentence 10 times and imagined the blue car in a stranger's kitchen catching the light wrong. I typed, deleted, typed again, then finally pasted from neutral phrases and added spine. Per our written agreement, no introductions for 90 days. We can revisit on date after we both share information with each other and with the counselor. I'm open to a call with the counselor to discuss guidelines. I hit send and put the phone face down like a person learning to trust the structure they built. Her reply came minutes later, clipped, "Fine. I'll let the period be the period," and didn't try to round the edges. The court stamped our temporary plan into an order that arrived in the mail like a cold envelope and a warm exhale at once. Official language wrapped our homemade rules. Judges prefer clarity, and so do children. Ethan started using the calendar like it was a weather app. Blue week, he'd announce, tapping the square with my initial, or yellow week when it was hers. He began packing his backpack for transitions with a competence that made me proud and a little sad. Resilience is a beautiful thing. It grows in places you wish didn't need it. One night at pickup, she lingered by the door. "You've changed," she said, not accusing, more anthropological. "You used to try to make everything better all the time." "I'm trying to make one thing steady," I said. "That's different." "Do you hate me?" she asked again, as if the answer might finally let her file her own feelings. "No," I said, and found I meant it more than before. "I have boundaries. They're less dramatic and more useful." She nodded, a small surrender to reality. "He's doing okay," she said, glancing past me to where Ethan was aligning his shoes like a tiny soldier. "Better than I expected." "He likes jobs," I said. "He likes knowing where the spoons go." After she left, Ethan ran back to hug me a second time. "Backup hug," he said, delighted with his own system. I closed the door and held that phrase like a coin in my pocket. Backup hug. Backup plan. Backup self for the days my first one is tired. Fallout still dusted us. Boundaries still needed wiping and restating. But the house no longer felt like a stage waiting for a fight scene. It felt like a workshop. Tools hung where they belong, a project list pinned to the wall, a boy in the corner building something out of blocks and belief. I didn't know what the finished thing would be. I only knew the measurements would be honest, and the floor under his feet would hold. Closure didn't arrive with a ribbon. It showed up like sunrise through cheap lines, striped, patient, and impossible to rush. Months stacked quietly. Court made our temporary plan official. The judge's signature, a thin black line that felt heavier than steel. Ethan learned the rhythm of blue week and yellow week, the way tides learn to trust the moon. I learned how to keep a house for one, and sometimes two, to cook for exactly the mouths at the table, to leave leftovers on purpose for the version of me that forgets lunch. Therapy became my honest hour. I sat in the same brown chair every Wednesday and told the truth, as if saying it might organize it. The therapist, a woman with gray hair and shoes that squeaked when she crossed her legs, asked questions that were smaller than I expected and larger in effect. "Where did you outsource your needs?" she asked once, soft like it might scare. "What did you call love when it was really avoidance?" I didn't have answers, not the first time. We circled back. We always circle back. Healing feels like walking a spiral staircase. You think you're seeing the same view until you notice you're higher. At home, I made Saturday mornings ours. Pancakes, the good vanilla, Ethan standing on a stool to stir and splatter, music low. We added rituals on purpose. The chef's tasting, bite where he decides if more cinnamon is necessary. Always. The launch sequence where he counts down before flipping. The customer feedback form, which is a thumbs up and syrup. Tiny ceremonies teach a home to remember joy even after the war. My mother's house became a harbor. On Sundays we fed ducks stale bread and listened to the park's gossip. Squirrels quarrel. Old men commentate chess. The fountain insists on optimism. She didn't give advice so much as presence. "You look rested in the eyes," she said once, which is a compliment only mothers know how to give. I kept my resentment on a leash around her and was surprised how quickly it stopped pulling. Co-parenting matured the way bread does. It rose and fell and finally held shape. Our messages stayed in the lanes. Switch pickup? He needs poster board. Then it's Thursday at 4. Sometimes she'd add, he told a joke about a Triceratops firefighter, and we'd be briefly human in the margin. The 90-day rule came and went. When she asked again to introduce a friend, I said yes with parameters, daytime, public, short. She complied. Ethan reported back that the friend was fine and didn't know how to build a good Lego roof. I filed that under harmless, which is the best category available for someone new near a child. The house learned my handprint. I fixed the squeaky cabinet, oiled the door with the winter groan, replaced the light bulb in the hallway that had made evening feel like a cave. I moved a chair to face the window and started reading again. Books with pages that smell like trees, stories where nothing explodes. I boxed wedding photos on a rain day that seemed to ask for it. I didn't rage or mourn theatrically. I sat with each picture long enough to remember the humans in it. Two people doing their best with tools they hadn't learned to name yet. I kept one photo in a drawer, string lights in our friend's backyard, her laughing at something I can't hear anymore. Not an altar, just a receipt for a decade. Time requires accounting. Ethan began keeping his own log, unprompted, a calendar with stickers for excellent days and dots for regular days. He gave a dot to the afternoon we both cried because a science project broke in transit and we rebuilt it better, which taught me something about grading systems. He gave a star to the night. We ate cereal for dinner and watched the thunder like a movie. He gave a star to the day. I let him teach me how to use his favorite game controller. I lost on purpose 3 times before winning once on accident. Fair win, he declared. We shook hands like men after a match. I bumped into Dylan once at the hardware store. He looked thinner, like someone who'd been living on vending machine food and apologies. I felt the old heat rise. Anger, the fantasy of one perfect speech that would puncture him like a cartoon balloon. I chose restraint, which feels less like sainthood and more like keeping your shoes clean. I nodded once. He nodded back. We both bought screws, because even men who break things eventually need to hold something together. One evening she stood on the porch when I brought Ethan home. Sunset made a painting out of sky that hadn't done anything special all day. "Thank you," she said after he ran inside to show her a crumpled art project, "for how you've handled everything." The sentence had splinters, but it was attempt. "You're welcome," I said, which is a statement and a boundary at once. We didn't hug. We didn't reminisce. We let the politeness stand upright on its new legs. The final hearing was mercifully administrative. The judge read our agreement like a grocery list and checked boxes that meant adult life would keep moving. Dissolution, a word that sounds like sugar disappearing into tea. We stood side by side and didn't look at each other. Afterwards, I walked to the parking lot and sat in the car until the feeling found a name. Not victory, not defeat. Relief. A door, finally labeled, that we could both stop walking into. That night, Ethan asked from his pillow, "Are we okay now?" The kind of question children invent to test the frame. I didn't hurry my answer. "We're honest now," I said. "Honest can be hard, but it holds." He nodded and fell asleep in 5 breaths. I stayed a minute longer counting with him. 5 in, sigh on 6. And then I turned off the light and stood in the doorway of a room that felt both smaller and sturdier than before. In the kitchen, I poured tea and opened my notebook to a blank page. I didn't need to log evidence anymore. I wrote a different kind of list. Things I can control. How I speak. How I show up when I rest. Things I can't. Other people's choices. The timing of grief. The speed of trust. I tore the page out and stuck it on the fridge beside the boundaries. Not because I needed reminding, but because walls deserve honest words. Before bed, I took the blue toy car from my nightstand and set on the dresser where morning light would find it. A small mercy, a small God. Not an idol, an anchor. The past had been a long goodbye. The future, I decided, could be a series of clear hellos. Moral: betrayal breaks what was never built to lie. Boundaries, truth, and steady love, especially for the child watching, turn wreckage into structure. You don't win by hurting back. You heal by holding steady, naming things correctly, and choosing peace even when rage offers fireworks.